The kingdom of Rajgarh was drowning in fear. Every street, every market, and every home whispered the name of Raja Veer Singh, a ruler whose iron fist crushed the weak. His soldiers marched through villages, collecting heavy taxes, leaving families starving. Those who resisted were met with fire and blood. Arjun once stood among those soldiers, a warrior bound by loyalty. He had fought in the king's wars, believing in honor and duty. But honor meant nothing when the same king ordered his family's execution. Branded a traitor, hunted like an animal, Arjun disappeared into the shadows, his heart burning with vengeance. The people suffered in silence, but not all were broken. Deep in the forests, where the king's reach was weak, a rebellion was rising. Meera, fierce and unyielding, led a group of rebels who had lost everything to the tyrant's greed. Her eyes held the fire of justice, a fire that Arjun had long buried under grief. One night, the rebels intercepted a royal convoy. They moved like ghosts, swift and deadly. Gold, weapons, supplies, everything stolen from the poor was taken back. But with every victory came a cost. The king's wrath grew, and villages faced even crueler punishments. Arjun watched from a distance, torn between his past and the future Meera spoke of. He had once believed in loyalty. Now he saw only betrayal. He wanted revenge, but was revenge enough? Then the massacre happened. A small village, one that had secretly provided shelter to rebels, was burned to the ground. Women and children, slaughtered without mercy. Among them was an old man who had once given Arjun bread when he was starving. That night, Arjun made his choice. He found the rebels deep in the forest, their faces worn by loss but hardened by purpose. He stood before Meera and the others, his voice steady. "No more hiding. No more running. We fight." Meera studied him, searching for doubt, but found none. She nodded, and with that silent agreement, a war began. The rebels had numbers, but numbers weren't enough. They were farmers, blacksmiths, and merchants, people who had never held a sword, let alone fought a war. Arjun saw their spirit, but spirit wouldn't stop a blade. They needed discipline, tactics, and above all, trust. And trust was something Arjun had yet to earn. Many still saw him as the king's man. Some whispered that he was a spy, waiting for the right moment to betray them. He ignored their doubts, focusing on what needed to be done. Training began at dawn and ended past nightfall. Weakness was burned away, replaced by instinct. A sword had to feel like an extension of the arm. A bowstring had to be drawn without hesitation. Failure in training meant death in battle. Meera challenged him at every turn. She wasn't just a leader, she was the rebellion's heart. Where Arjun believed in brute force, she believed in strategy. She taught him that war wasn't just about fighting, it was about knowing when not to. The king's army had thousands. The rebels had hundreds. A direct fight would be suicide. Then came the betrayal. One of their own, a man desperate for gold, led the king's soldiers to their camp. Fire erupted in the night as the rebels were ambushed. Swords clashed, arrows flew, and blood soaked the ground. The rebels fought with everything they had, but they were outnumbered. Meera took an arrow to the shoulder, yet she kept fighting. Arjun saw the hesitation in his people, the fear creeping into their eyes. He had to act. He took command, rallying them, forcing them to move as one. They didn't need to win this battle. They needed to survive it. By dawn, the forest was silent. Bodies of the fallen lay among the ashes of what was once their camp. The king had struck first, but he had made a mistake. He had given the rebels a reason to unite. Arjun stood before them, no longer a soldier of the past, but a leader of the future. He met their eyes one by one and said, "The king came for us in the night. Next time, we go for him in the light." And for the first time, they didn't see him as the king's man. They saw him as their own. The rebellion moved with precision. Every supply line, every convoy, every outpost that served the king became a target. The people, once afraid, now looked to the rebels with hope. What started as whispers in the dark turned into open defiance. The king's banners were torn down, his soldiers attacked in the streets. Rajgarh was no longer his to command. The king retaliated with ruthless force. Entire villages were burned as warnings. Captured rebels were executed publicly. The streets ran red, but the rebellion did not break. Arjun knew this war had only one ending. The king had to fall. The time came when the palace was vulnerable. A festival meant the city gates would be open, security spread thin. It was a risk, but there would be no better chance. Arjun, Meera, and a group of warriors infiltrated the palace, blending with the crowd. The halls of the fortress, once familiar to Arjun, now felt foreign. Each step brought him closer to the man who had destroyed his life. Guards fell swiftly under their blades as they moved toward the throne room. Alarms rang through the palace. They had been spotted, but it didn't matter. The king would face judgment tonight. Arjun pushed through the grand doors, and there he was, Raja Veer Singh, dressed in his battle armor, sword in hand. He was older now, but his presence had not faded. His eyes met Arjun's, and for the first time, there was no command, no authority, only recognition. "You are always my best warrior," the king said, circling him. "And now, my greatest enemy." Arjun said nothing. There were no words left to speak. Steel met steel as they clashed, the sound echoing through the chamber. The king fought with the skill of a seasoned warrior, but Arjun fought with something greater: purpose. The battle was brutal, both men pushing beyond their limits. Blood dripped onto the marble floor. The king was fast, but he was not faster than justice. Arjun's blade found its mark, cutting through the past, through betrayal, through pain. The king staggered, gripping his wound. But even in his last moments he smiled. "Killing me won't end this," he whispered. "Kings rise. Kings fall. But power never dies." Arjun stood over him, sword raised. But at that moment, he realized this war wasn't about revenge. It was about something greater. The doors burst open. The rebels had taken the palace. The people of Rajgarh flooded in, eyes burning with the same fury that had driven Arjun all these years. The king was defeated, but the final decision was not his to make. It belonged to the people. The throne room was silent, except for the labored breathing of the fallen king. Blood pooled beneath him, but his grip on power had already slipped. He looked at the people who had once bowed before him. Now, they stood tall, their fear replaced by something stronger: freedom. Meera stepped forward, her wound still fresh, but her resolve unshaken. "This isn't just about one man," she said. "It's about what comes after." The crowd murmured. Some wanted blood. Others wanted justice. Arjun saw the rage in their eyes, the same rage that had driven him for years. But vengeance was a chain, and they had fought too hard to remain bound. He turned to the people. "We burn this throne, not to replace it with another tyrant, but to make sure no one ever rules with fear again." A moment of silence, then a roar of agreement. The people moved as one, dragging the king from his seat of power. He did not beg, did not plead. He only watched as the throne, the very symbol of his rule, was set ablaze. Flames climbed high, swallowing years of cruelty, lighting the darkened palace with the promise of something new. As the fire raged, Arjun stepped outside, breathing in the air of a free Rajgarh. The night sky, once suffocating, now felt endless. Meera joined him, her face softened for the first time since they met. "It's over," she said. Arjun nodded, but deep inside, he knew revolutions never truly ended. The fight was never just about swords and kings. It was about the choices people made long after the war was won. He looked back one last time, then turned away from the palace. The war was over. His part in it was done. Now, the people would decide what came next. With the first light of dawn breaking over the city, Arjun walked away, not as a warrior, not as a rebel, but as a man finally free from the past.